Jimmy Cliff secretly orchestrated the 1978 One Love peace concert by convincing Bob Marley to unite Jamaica's warring political factions. It was December 3, 1976, in the hills above Kingston, Jamaica. Jimmy Cliff sat in his Rastafarian meditation room, surrounded by candles and burning frankincense, listening to radio reports that made his heart heavy with grief and anger. Jamaica was tearing itself apart, and the music that he and Bob Marley had spent their careers creating to spread love and unity was being drowned out by the sound of gunfire in the streets. The island was in the grip of the most violent political crisis in its history. The ruling People's National Party, led by Michael Manley, and the opposition Jamaica Labour Party, led by Edward Seaga, had turned Jamaica into a battlefield. Political gangs, armed with automatic weapons, controlled entire neighborhoods, and innocent civilians were being murdered daily in a cycle of revenge that seemed to have no end. What made the situation even more heartbreaking for Jimmy was that both political parties were using reggae music to rally their supporters, taking songs about love, unity, and spiritual consciousness, and turning them into anthems for political violence. The very music that was supposed to heal Jamaica was being weaponized to destroy it. But what had pushed Jimmy to the edge of despair happened just 3 days earlier. On November 30th, gunmen had invaded Bob Marley's home at 56 Hope Road, attempting to assassinate the king of reggae just 2 days before he was scheduled to perform at a PNP rally called Smile Jamaica. Bob had been wounded, along with his wife Rita and manager Don Taylor, in an attack that shocked the entire island and the world. Jimmy understood immediately that this wasn't just an attack on Bob Marley the musician. It was an attack on the spiritual power of reggae music itself. Someone was trying to silence the voice that had been speaking truth to power and calling for unity in a divided nation. As Jimmy sat in meditation that December evening, he felt a divine calling that was stronger than anything he had experienced since his early days discovering Rastafarian spirituality. Jah was asking him to do something that seemed impossible, to use his influence and connections to heal Jamaica's political wounds through the power of music. The vision that came to Jimmy during his meditation was clear and specific. He saw Bob Marley on stage at a massive concert, but not performing for one political party or the other. Instead, Bob would perform for all of Jamaica, with leaders from both the PNP and JLP sharing the same stage, holding hands and demonstrating to the nation that political differences didn't have to mean bloodshed. When Jimmy opened his eyes from meditation, he knew that Jah had given him the most important mission of his life. He was going to orchestrate a peace concert that would force Jamaica's warring political factions to confront the spiritual truth that they were all children of the same divine love, regardless of their political affiliations. But first, Jimmy had to convince Bob Marley to participate in what would be an extremely dangerous undertaking. After the assassination attempt, Bob had retreated to London to recover from his wounds and escape the violence that was consuming Jamaica. Many people close to Bob were advising him never to return to Jamaica, warning that another attempt on his life was inevitable. Jimmy flew to London in January 1977, carrying with him the spiritual authority that came from years of Rastafarian meditation and his deep understanding of reggae music's divine mission. When he arrived at Bob's temporary residence in Chelsea, he found the king of reggae in a state of profound spiritual crisis. "Jimmy, brethren," Bob said when he opened the door, his arm still in a sling from the gunshot wounds, "I man don't know if I can go back to Jamaica. They tried to kill me for making music about love. How can I man continue to spread Jah's message when people want to silence it with bullets?" Jimmy looked into Bob's eyes and saw something he had rarely witnessed in his friend: fear mixed with spiritual doubt. The assassination attempt had shaken Bob's faith in music's power to overcome political hatred. And Jimmy understood that healing Bob's spirit was the first step toward healing Jamaica. "Bob," Jimmy said, settling into a chair across from his old friend and protege, "Jah didn't allow you to survive those bullets so you could hide in London. You survived because you have a mission to fulfill that's bigger than any political party, bigger than any individual's safety, bigger than anything we've ever attempted before." Over the following hours, Jimmy shared with Bob the vision he had received during meditation. He described a concert that would transcend politics, a gathering that would force Jamaica's leaders to choose between their commitment to violence and their commitment to the spiritual unity that reggae music represented. "Imagine this, brethren," Jimmy said, his voice carrying the passion of divine inspiration. "One Love Peace Concert, not for PNP, not for JLP, but for Jamaica. For all the mothers who have lost their sons to political violence, for all the children who are growing up with guns instead of guitars, for all the people who remember what Jamaica was like before politics turned us into enemies." Bob listened intently as Jimmy outlined his vision, but his expression remained skeptical. "Jimmy, you know what they'll say. They'll call it naive. They'll say that music can't stop bullets, that spiritual unity can't overcome political hatred." Jimmy leaned forward with the intensity of a prophet delivering divine revelation. "Bob, remember when you were 16 years old, busking on King Street, and a man told you that your music could change the world? You didn't believe it then either. But look what happened. Your music has already changed the world. It's spread Rastafarian consciousness to every continent. It's made people everywhere aware of Jamaica's spiritual heritage. It's given hope to oppressed people from Africa to America." "But this is different," Bob protested. "This is about stopping a civil war, not just inspiring people to feel good about themselves." Jimmy stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the London streets where Bob was hiding from his own destiny. When he turned back to face his friend, his voice carried the authority of someone who is speaking not just his own thoughts, but divine truth. "Bob, Jah didn't make you the king of reggae so you could run away when the message becomes dangerous. He made you the king so you could lead when leadership requires sacrifice. The assassination attempt wasn't meant to stop you. It was meant to test whether you have the spiritual courage to fulfill your destiny." The conversation continued through the night, with Jimmy systematically addressing every fear and objection that Bob raised. Jimmy's arguments weren't just logical, they were spiritual, grounded in Rastafarian theology about the responsibility that comes with divine gifts, and the obligation to serve Jah's will, even when it involves personal risk. "Think about Marcus Garvey," Jimmy reminded Bob. "Think about Haile Selassie. Think about all the prophets who came before us. They didn't retreat when their message became dangerous. They stood up stronger, because they knew that Jah's truth is more powerful than any human violence." By dawn, Jimmy had accomplished something that Bob's management team, his family, and even his closest advisors had been unable to achieve. He had convinced the king of reggae to return to Jamaica and risk his life for a peace concert that would either heal the nation or result in another assassination attempt. But convincing Bob was only the first step in Jimmy's master plan. The real challenge was convincing Jamaica's political leaders to participate in something that would require them to appear weak in the eyes of their most militant supporters. Jimmy spent the next 6 months traveling between London, where Bob was planning his return, and Jamaica, where he was conducting secret negotiations with representatives from both the PNP and JLP. Using his reputation as a respected artist who had remained above political partisanship, Jimmy was able to gain access to political leaders who would never have agreed to meet with each other directly. The breakthrough came in July 1977, when Jimmy met privately with Michael Manley, Jamaica's Prime Minister and leader of the PNP. Jimmy's approach was brilliant in its spiritual simplicity. Instead of talking about politics, he talked about legacy. "Prime Minister," Jimmy said during their private meeting at Jamaica House, "in 50 years, how do you want to be remembered? As the leader who allowed Jamaica to destroy itself with political violence, or as the leader who had the courage to choose peace over party politics?" Manley, who had been struggling with the moral weight of the violence that was being committed in his party's name, was moved by Jimmy's spiritual challenge. But he was also practical about the political risks. "Jimmy, if I appear at a peace concert with Edward Seaga, my own supporters might see it as a sign of weakness. The militants who are fighting for the PNP might feel betrayed." Jimmy's response drew on years of Rastafarian study and his deep understanding of spiritual leadership. "Prime Minister, true strength isn't about maintaining conflict. It's about having the courage to end conflict. Jah will judge us not by whether we won political battles, but by whether we save human lives." Similar conversations took place with Edward Seaga and other JLP leaders, with Jimmy using his spiritual authority and his reputation as a politically neutral artist to challenge their assumptions about power, strength, and legacy. The most delicate part of Jimmy's orchestration involved ensuring Bob's safety during the concert. Jimmy worked with both political parties to guarantee that their security forces would cooperate in protecting the venue and the performers. More importantly, he used his network of Rastafarian elders and community leaders to create a spiritual security force that would surround the event with prayers, meditation, and positive energy. "This concert isn't just about politics," Jimmy told a gathering of Rastafarian brethren in the weeks leading up to the event. "This is about demonstrating that spiritual consciousness is stronger than political hatred, that Jah's love is more powerful than Babylon's violence." The One Love Peace concert was announced for April 22, 1978, at Kingston's National Stadium. The announcement itself was historic. Never before had Jamaica's warring political factions agreed to attend the same event, let alone an event designed to promote peace and unity. Jimmy's role in organizing the concert remained largely behind the scenes, but his influence was visible in every detail. The lineup included not just Bob Marley, but other conscious artists who were committed to spreading messages of unity rather than political division. The stage design incorporated Rastafarian symbols alongside Jamaican national symbols, emphasizing spiritual unity over political identity. Most importantly, Jimmy had negotiated agreements from both Michael Manley and Edward Seaga to attend the concert and make public statements about their commitment to reducing political violence. The days leading up to the concert were tense, with many observers predicting that the event would either be canceled due to security concerns or would itself become a target for political violence. But Jimmy remained confident that Jah's will would be fulfilled. On the morning of April 22, 1978, Jimmy conducted a private Rastafarian ceremony with Bob Marley and the other performers, blessing the event and dedicating it to the service of divine love and human unity. Today, we're not just musicians, Jimmy told the gathered artists. Today, we're servants of Jah's peace, instruments of his love, messengers of his unity. Whatever happens on that stage tonight, remember that we're serving something higher than entertainment. We're serving the salvation of our nation. The concert itself became one of the most significant events in Jamaican history. Bob Marley's performance was transcendent, carrying spiritual power that seemed to lift the entire audience above their political divisions. But the climactic moment came when Jimmy's months of careful orchestration reached their fulfillment. During Bob's performance of Jamming, he called both Michael Manley and Edward Seaga onto the stage. In front of 32,000 people and a television audience that included much of the Caribbean, the leaders of Jamaica's warring political factions joined hands with Bob Marley in a gesture that symbolized the possibility of unity over division. Jimmy, watching from the wings, felt the satisfaction of someone who had successfully served as an instrument of divine will. The vision he had received during meditation 18 months earlier had become reality through months of patient diplomacy, spiritual wisdom, and unwavering faith in music's power to transcend political hatred. The immediate impact of the One Love Peace concert was dramatic. Political violence in Jamaica decreased significantly in the weeks following the event, as both parties made efforts to honor their public commitment to reducing tensions. More importantly, the concert demonstrated to the world that reggae music could serve as a force for peace and reconciliation, not just entertainment. But Jimmy's greatest satisfaction came from knowing that he had helped Bob Marley fulfill his destiny as not just the king of reggae, but as a spiritual leader whose influence extended far beyond music. The assassination attempt that had nearly silenced Bob's voice had instead strengthened it, making him an international symbol of courage and spiritual consciousness. Years later, when music historians analyzed the One Love Peace concert, many focused on Bob Marley's performance and the symbolic handshake between the political leaders. But those who understood the deeper story recognized Jimmy Cliff's role as the spiritual architect, whose vision, diplomacy, and unwavering faith had made the impossible become reality. Jimmy was the one who saw what nobody else could see, Bob reflected in a 1980 interview. He saw that politics and spirituality didn't have to be enemies, that music could serve peace as well as consciousness, that even the most divided nation could be unified through Jah's love. The peace concert was Bob Marley's performance, but it was Jimmy Cliff's vision. Jimmy, characteristically humble about his role in one of Jamaica's most important historical events, viewed the peace concert as simply fulfilling the mission that Jah had given him during that December 1976 meditation. When you serve divine will, you don't take credit for the results, Jimmy reflected years later. You just feel grateful that Jah allowed you to be his instrument. The peace concert proved that music can heal any division, overcome any hatred, unite any community, but only when it serves spiritual truth instead of political ambition. The One Love Peace concert stands today as proof that spiritual vision, patient diplomacy, and unwavering faith can accomplish what political negotiations and military force cannot. And while Bob Marley became the public face of that historic achievement, it was Jimmy Cliff's secret orchestration that transformed a vision of peace into the reality of a nation united, however briefly, by the power of conscious music and divine love. If this incredible story of behind-the-scenes spiritual diplomacy that prevented civil war moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more amazing tales of how music leaders use their influence to heal division and create peace. Share this video with someone who believes that spiritual wisdom can overcome political hatred and that music can serve the highest purposes of human unity. Have you ever witnessed music bringing together people who seem to be permanent enemies? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to check out our other videos about the moments when artists chose to serve peace over politics and change the course of history.